If someone had told Osariemen that this ordinary morning would change her life forever, she would have laughed. She had no idea that before the day ended, one meeting would change not only her life, but the future of the entire village. The shrill sound of an alarm clock pierced the silence of the small apartment. Osariemen Eseosa Igbinedion stretched her hand from beneath her thin blanket and switched it off without opening her eyes. For a few seconds, she remained still, staring quietly at the ceiling above her. Another morning, another school day, another opportunity to make a difference. She sat up slowly and glanced around the room she had called home for the past 3 years. It wasn't much. A neatly made bed stood against one wall. Beside it sat a small reading table covered with lesson notes, marked exercise books, and children's drawings that some of her pupils had insisted she keep. A metal wardrobe stood in one corner, while a small framed photograph of her late father rested quietly on the table beside a Bible. 3 years earlier, she had arrived in Dutse with a single box and a National Youth Service Corps posting letter. She had planned to spend 1 year serving the country before returning home to Air State. Instead, community school had happened. She had fallen in love with the children. She had fallen in love with teaching. And somehow, without even realizing it, the forgotten little school on Old Quarry Road had become the place she now called home. The pay was small. The workload was endless. Almost everyone she knew had questioned her decision to stay. But every morning when she walked through those old school gates, she remembered exactly why she had stayed. Osas knelt beside her bed and bowed her head. Thank you, Lord, for another day. Give me the strength to be a blessing to someone today. After praying, she folded her blanket neatly before beginning her usual morning routine. She swept the room, fetched water from the compound tap, bathed quickly, and prepared a simple breakfast of bread and tea. As she ate, her phone vibrated. Mom. A smile immediately appeared on her face. She answered, Good morning, Mom. My daughter, how are you? I'm fine. Have you eaten? I'm eating now. You work too hard. Osas laughed softly. I learned from you. Her mother chuckled. When are you coming home? I'll try during the next holiday. You've been saying that for months. I know. There was a brief silence before her mother spoke again. You sent too much money again. It wasn't too much. You should think about yourself too. I am thinking about myself. No, you're thinking about everybody except yourself. Osa smiled, even though her mother couldn't see it. If I have enough, then we have enough. Her mother sighed. I pray God remembers you one day. He already has, Mom. After ending the call, Osas looked at the transfer notification on her phone. Half of her monthly salary had already been sent home 2 days earlier. She wasn't rich. Far from it. But ever since her father's death, she had quietly accepted responsibilities that belonged to no 25-year-old. She packed her lesson notes into her old leather handbag, checked today's lesson plan one last time, and locked the apartment behind her. The streets of Kakara were slowly coming alive. Shop owners swept their storefronts. Motorcycle riders argued over passengers. Women arranged vegetables beneath colorful umbrellas. The aroma of freshly fried akara drifted through the cool morning air. Osas greeted almost everyone she passed. Good morning, Ma. Morning, Auntie Teacher. Teacher Osas. Children waved excitedly as they hurried towards school. Instead of taking a motorcycle, she chose to walk. It wasn't because she enjoyed the distance. She had simply done the mathematics. Walking to school 4 days every week saved enough transport money to buy extra pencils, chalk, and storybooks for children whose parents could barely afford school fees. To everyone else, it was a long walk. To Osas, it was another way of teaching. After nearly 30 minutes, the familiar blue signboard came into view. Community School, Old Quarry Road. The old building stood quietly beneath the morning sun. Its walls carried years of cracked paint. Some windows had broken louvre blades. The assembly ground was uneven. One classroom roof leaked whenever it rained. Visitors often wondered why the government hadn't replaced it long ago. Yet every morning, life returned. Children poured through the rusty gates, carrying oversized school bags and dreams even bigger than them. The moment they saw Osas, excited voices filled the compound. "Good morning, Auntie Osas." She greeted every child by name. "Good morning, Fatima." "Welcome, Musa." "Chinedu, how is your little brother?" "Amina, your cough is better now?" The children always found it amazing that she remembered every little detail about their lives. She didn't do it to impress them. She simply cared enough to remember. As the assembly bell rang, pupils formed neat lines across the dusty compound. Teachers took their positions. The national anthem echoed through the old school buildings. Osas looked across the faces standing before her. Some had eaten breakfast. Some had not. Some would return to loving homes. Others would return to homes burdened by hunger, hardship, and uncertainty. But for the next few hours, inside community school, every child deserved the same opportunity to dream. She stepped forward. "Good morning, everyone." "Good morning, Ma. I want all of you to remember something today." The children became quiet. Never allow where you come from to decide where you're going. A small hand slowly rose. It belonged to Musa. "But Auntie, what if people laugh at us because we're poor?" For a moment, the entire assembly became silent. Osas walked closer to him and smiled. "Then, let your success become your answer." The pupils erupted into applause. The assembly gradually came to an end as the pupils marched quietly toward their classrooms. Within minutes, the once noisy compound settled into the familiar rhythm of another school day. Inside Primary 5, Osas placed her lesson notes gently on the table and looked across the classroom. 32 pupils, 32 different dreams, 32 different battles waiting for them outside those classroom walls. "Good morning once again, class." "Good morning, Auntie Osas. I hope everybody came with their homework." A chorus of different answers filled the room. "Yes, Ma. I forgot mine. My little brother tore my book. I couldn't finish because there was no light." The classroom burst into laughter. Osas laughed with them. "One at a time, we'll hear every excuse today." She walked slowly between the rows, collecting exercise books. Unlike many teachers, she never embarrassed children for their mistakes. She believed children learned faster when they felt safe. As she reached the back of the classroom, she noticed Chinedu hiding his notebook beneath the desk. She crouched beside him. "You didn't do it." The boy lowered his head. "There was no kerosene, Ma." Osas looked at him for a second. She already knew his father had been out of work for months. Instead of scolding him, she smiled. "Then you'll sit with me after school today." The boy looked up nervously. "Am I in trouble?" She shook her head. "We'll do it together." A smile slowly spread across his face. "Thank you, Ma." The lesson began. Instead of reading directly from the textbook, Osas filled the lesson with stories, demonstrations, and questions that made the children think. Whenever someone answered correctly, the class applauded. Whenever someone answered wrongly, she applauded the courage to try before helping them understand the correct answer. By the end of the first lesson, even the quietest pupils had contributed something. Outside the classroom, another teacher watched through the window and smiled. "I don't know how you do it," she said as the pupils left for short break. Osas laughed. "Do what?" "Make them love learning." "I don't." The teacher raised an eyebrow. "I just love them first." The older woman remained silent for a moment. "You know, I received another interview invitation yesterday." Osas smiled. "That's wonderful. It's in Abuja. You should go." "I probably will." She looked around the aging school. "This place won't survive much longer." Osas's smile faded slightly. "It will." "You still believe that?" "I have to." The teacher sighed. "I used to believe that too." She gently squeezed Osas's shoulder before walking away. Osas stood quietly outside the classroom. Her eyes wandered across the school compound. Two boys were repairing a broken football with pieces of nylon rope. A little girl sat beneath the mango tree, reading aloud to three younger pupils. The old school bell leaned awkwardly on its rusted metal frame. One classroom window had been held together with wire for almost a year. Everything around her told the same story. The school was tired, but it hadn't given up. Neither had she. Just then, Fatima came running toward her. "Auntie Osas." "Yes, I want to show you something." The little girl proudly opened her exercise book. At the top of the page was written in large, slightly crooked handwriting, "My dream is to become a doctor." Osas looked at the page for a long moment. Then she looked at Fatima. "And you will." The little girl smiled. "You really think so?" "I don't think so." Osas gently closed the book and handed it back to her. "I know so." Fatima hugged the book tightly before running back to her friends. Osas watched her disappear into the crowd of children. Moments like that reminded her why she had stayed in Dutsi after her NYSC ended. Not because the salary was good, not because the school was comfortable, but because every single day she had the opportunity to convince children that their future could be bigger than their circumstances. She didn't know it yet. The afternoon sun hung high above community school as the lunch break came to an end. The once lively compound slowly settled again as pupils hurried back into their classrooms, still laughing and teasing one another. Osas remained outside for a few moments, watching them disappear into the old buildings one after another. Every smile she saw reminded her why leaving had never felt right. "Auntie Osas." She turned to see one of the younger teachers waving from the staff room. "The headmistress is looking for you." "I'll be there in a minute." She dusted her hands after helping two boys return a broken bench to their classroom before making her way toward the small staff room. The room reflected the school itself. Old wooden chairs, a ceiling fan that only worked when electricity decided to cooperate, metal filing cabinets whose paint had almost completely peeled away. Exercise books covered almost every available surface. The headmistress looked up as Osas entered. "There you are. You wanted to see me, Ma?" "Yes. Sit down." Osas pulled a chair closer. The headmistress removed a pair of reading glasses and rubbed her eyes tiredly. "I've just finished preparing another request to the local education authority." Osas smiled knowingly. "The roof again?" "The roof, the broken windows, the fence, the toilets." She sighed. "I've lost count of how many letters we've written." Another teacher chuckled softly. "If letters could repair buildings, community school would be the finest school in Nigeria. The room filled with quiet laughter. The laughter didn't last long. One of the teachers leaned forward excitedly. "Have you people heard?" "Heard what?" Another asked. "There's a politician visiting schools across the local government." Everyone looked at her. They said he's renovating classrooms, donating books, and promising to improve education. The headmistress smiled faintly. Politicians always remember schools when elections are close. More laughter. "I heard he was at Unity Primary yesterday," another teacher added. "They received new desks. And at Government Day School last week, they even got computers." The room suddenly became quiet. For a brief moment, everyone imagined what community school could become. Fresh paint, new roofs, proper classrooms, a library, a science room. The headmistress smiled sadly. "I wish he would come here." Another teacher shook her head. "He won't." "Why not?" "When politicians visit schools, they visit schools people already know." She looked around the aging staff room. "We're forgotten." Nobody replied. Even Osais remained silent. Not because she agreed, but because she understood why they felt that way. The headmistress broke the silence. "Still, I've learned never to stop hoping." She folded a letter she had just signed. "One day, someone will remember community school." Osa smiled. "I believe that too." The headmistress looked at her and laughed softly. "You always believe." "If teachers stop believing," Osas replied, "who will teach your children to?" The room fell silent again. This time, not because of disappointment, but because every teacher in that room wished they still possessed the kind of hope that came so naturally to Osas. Outside, the afternoon bell rang once more. The children hurried back into their classrooms. Lessons continued. Life at community school carried on exactly as it had the day before. Completely unaware that somewhere in the city, the very politician they had just been talking about was unknowingly driving closer to becoming part of the story. The final school bell echoed across community school, and almost immediately, the compound came alive again. Classroom doors opened. Children rushed out laughing, calling one another's names as they hurried toward the gate. Some parents had already arrived to pick up their children. Others would walk home together in small groups, their conversations louder than the bell that had just dismissed them. As always, Osas remained behind. She stood at the school gates until the last child had safely left the compound. Only then did she turn back. Inside one classroom, she rearranged the desks the pupils had left scattered about. In another, she closed windows that had been left open. She picked up pieces of paper from the floor and placed forgotten exercise books neatly on a teacher's desk. Nobody had asked her to do any of it. She simply couldn't bring herself to leave the school untidy. As she locked the final classroom, she heard footsteps behind her. It was the headmistress. "You've still not gone home?" Osa smiled. "I was just finishing up." The older woman shook her head. "One day, the school will make you forget. You have your own life." Osa laughed softly. "I still have one." Barely. They began walking slowly toward the school gate together. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, the headmistress broke the silence. "You know, I've been watching you since your NYSC days." Osis looked at her. "I've watched teachers come and go. Some stayed because they couldn't find another job. Some stayed because they were afraid to start again. But you," she smiled warmly, "you stayed because you genuinely love these children." Osas looked back at the empty classrooms. I don't know. I just couldn't leave. The headmistress nodded. I know. I want you to know that I see all the things you've been doing in this school. We all do. And we don't take it for granted. For a brief moment, Osas was speechless. She wasn't used to being appreciated. She simply smiled. Thank you, Ma. I only do what I believe every teacher should do. The headmistress smiled knowingly. No, Osas. That's exactly why you're different. They reached the gate. The older woman locked it carefully before placing the heavy key inside her handbag. Go home and rest. I'm certain you'll be back here before sunrise tomorrow, as usual. Osas laughed. Definitely. The headmistress walked away. Osas remained standing outside the gate for a few seconds longer. The compound was quiet now. Only the sound of birds could be heard from the large neem tree standing at one corner of the school. She looked around one last time. Her eyes lingered on the quiet school compound for a few seconds. She smiled to herself before finally beginning the long walk home. Across another part of Dutse, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Music filled the air. Campaign banners stretched across busy streets. Supporters wearing branded caps and t-shirts cheered as a convoy of black SUVs slowly made its way through the town. Honorable Idris, our chairman, God bless you, sir. People rushed toward the roadside waving excitedly. Some stretched out their hands hoping to shake his. Others simply smiled proudly as the convoy passed. Inside the lead vehicle sat Idris Tafida, neatly dressed in a spotless white embroidered kaftan. He listened quietly as one of his campaign aides read through the day's itinerary. Next stop, sir, the Traders Association meeting. After that, the youth leaders. Then a courtesy visit to the Emir's palace. Idris nodded without looking up. And after that, the aide checked his file. Nothing else, sir. That concludes today's schedule. Idris looked through the window. Children played football on a dusty field nearby. Women bargained loudly in front of market stalls. Life continued as though politics didn't exist. He smiled faintly. Let's make one more stop before heading back. The aide looked surprised. Where, sir? Idris didn't answer immediately. His attention had drifted elsewhere. As the convoy approached Old Quarry Road, something caught his eye. An old blue signboard. Community School. Behind it stood an aging school building with faded paint and cracked walls. It looked forgotten. Yet what truly caught his attention wasn't the building. It was a young woman standing outside the gate. She had just come out through the school gate alongside an elderly woman who appeared to be the headmistress. The older woman continued down the road, but the younger woman stopped. She turned around. Her eyes lingered on the quiet school compound for a few seconds. A small smile crossed her face, the kind of smile only someone who genuinely loved a place could wear. She adjusted the strap of her worn leather handbag and began walking home. Idris continued watching through the tinted window. The convoy drove past the school. For several seconds, he said nothing. The vehicles continued moving. The campaign aide resumed talking. Tomorrow, we'll begin preparations for... Stop. The driver immediately pressed the brakes. One after another, the convoy behind them came to a halt. Everyone looked toward Idris. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror. Sir. Idris's eyes never left the road behind them. The lady. Nobody understood. The one walking away from the school. The aide looked through the rear window. The teacher? Idris nodded. Turn around. The driver hesitated for only a second before steering the vehicle into a careful U-turn. Instead of heading back toward the school, the convoy slowly drove toward the lone woman walking quietly along Old Quarry Road. Neither Idris nor Osas had the slightest idea that history had just quietly changed direction. The man in the convoy wasn't looking for a teacher. So, why did he stop? This wasn't the beginning. It was the continuation of a story buried decades ago, and neither of them knew it. Discover what happened next in episode 2